Want to welcome and thank you for coming Gary Kohn, who is the vice chairman at IBM. He used to work, he was part of the original Trump administration as an economic advisor. So, Gary, I'd be remiss, given that it is inauguration week. I assume you've given a little bit of thought to what you were doing 8 years ago right now. What is, to you, and take this where you will, is the biggest difference so far that you've seen between Trump 1.0 and 2.0?
Well, thanks for having me. So, I think to summarize it quickly, because it's an answer that could go on forever. You know, look, Trump 2.0 comes in with 8 years of experience, right? When Trump came in 8 years ago, you know, he was an unknown politician, didn't really understand Washington, didn't understand the power of the White House, didn't understand the power of the presidency. 8 years later, he comes in and there's a stack of 100 executive orders on his desk because now he understands I've got the power of this pen. It's not law, but I can influence the outcomes for the next 4 years until the next president signs an executive order to rescind all my executive orders. So, you know, he does come in with the knowledge of understanding what the office can do, what the office can't do, and how to leverage the office. And I think that's a big advantage.
It feels from walking around Davos that the general, at least from the U.S. business community perspective right now is very positive. Obviously, more business-friendly administration, unleashing animal spirits, et cetera. Are you surprised by how giddy some U.S. business people and Wall Street folks, your former world, seem to be?
Yeah, look, there's overwhelming optimism here. And I get it on one hand, and I don't get it on the other hand. The hand that gets it, now I'm speaking like a lawyer on the other hand. I'm not a lawyer. The hand that gets it is the regulatory environment in the last 4 years of the Biden administration was beyond stifling. I'm sure there's people in this room, no matter what business you're in, you felt it. Like the wrath of Lena Khan. Someone in this room probably loves her. The wrath of Lena Khan and what she was doing to businesses and how she was stifling creativity and stifling synergistic mergers.
I see how she was stifling certain, obviously, mergers.
Yeah.
When you say stifling creativity, what do you mean?
Well, just the ability to put things together, mergers, putting companies together, creativity, products. You know, the amount of inquiry that was going on privately behind the scenes to companies was just extraordinary. And the amount of investigations that was going on, whether it was the SEC, whether it was the CFTC, whether it was the FDIC, depending who you were regulated by. And if she regulated you, she was just one of a pile on. There was a Me Too effect in Washington. Every one of the regulators wanted to be Me Too. They wanted to be in on the game. And it was really, really stifling for the business community. So I think just the weight of that being taken off of people's backs, shoulders, heads, necks is created an enormous amount of, I would say optimism. So that in itself, no matter what happened, would have led to a more optimistic world. Then you go to a Trump 2.0, where they know that Trump 1.0 was, I would say, regulatory friendly, not zero regulation.
There were some mergers that got blocked in Trump 1.0.
There were definitely some. I said not no regulation, regulatorily friendly, where businesses were allowed to be businesses. They did block some mergers. They did block deals. They brought investigations against people that did things wrong, but people thought it was a much more sensible, reasonable, rational regulatory world where if you went in and talked to the regulatory world, you could have a rational conversation. Doesn't mean you were going to win. Doesn't mean it wasn't going to cost you something if you did something wrong, but you could have a rational conversation. So that's where all the optimism comes from. You know, the flip side, and I don't want to get too financially here. The flip side
okay
is,
with this crowd. We can do this. Okay. Can we be financial?
Well,
Let's be financial.
I can be banker.
Yeah, we can do this.
The flip side is, look, the administration starts with, stock market in the United States. It's sort of all-time record highs, multiples at all-time record highs, mostly through multiple expansion, not through much earnings expansion. You look at credit spreads at all-time record heights. The euphoria of the Fed cutting interest rates that was permeating the market last year is probably overdone. And I think realistically, the Fed may be done cutting interest rates because if you look at the economy in the United States right now, it's very sound. Job growth continues to be very steady. And the last mile of inflation continues to be more problematic as it always is. And a lot of the policies that the Trump administration is talking about is not going to help the last mile of inflation go away. So when you think of an environment where you're not going to be spurred on by a lower interest rate environment, where the credit cycle is tight, where the consumer is still spending, but we know that consumer debt is back at all-time record highs, and we know that credit card delinquencies are starting to spur. And so I look at this picture from a business standpoint and say, look, it's more neutral. I would say on the positive side of neutral. So I would characterize myself as cautiously optimistic.
Would you, assuming that somebody in your former job gets judged on how the economy goes, I
gave that job up.
I know, but in that past job, do you feel you were more confident in the prospects of getting kind of a good report card because the economy improves 8 years ago than you would be if you were Kevin Hassett today?
Look, I went to the White House for one reason only, and one reason really only. I wanted to reform the tax code.
Oh.
I wanted to reform the tax code. We can go into it. I don't want to bore people. And I was very optimistic that we could reform the tax code in the United States, and I was equally optimistic that that was going to be highly stimulative to the U.S. economy. So we also were in a very low interest rate environment. We probably had more tailwinds than headwinds. Right now, we've got sort of equal wins, I would say. And by reforming the tax code, I felt we were in a very good position to stimulate growth, stimulate economic activity. We forced repatriation of lots of tech dollars that were offshore. They got reinvested back in the United States. There were a lot of things we did in that tax code that I felt were very stimulative to the economy. So I was probably more bullish at that point economically than I am now. But look, we were trying, our goal, and the new Treasury Secretary sort of stole my line, and you can go back, I was a 3-3-3 guy, but I was 3% GDP, 3% wage growth, and 3% unemployment.
You left, and in part left over a dispute over tariffs on Chinese aluminum and steel. Obviously, tariffs have become a big talking point question. So this is my question for you, because you would know this better than almost anybody. Trump talks a lot when he talks about tariffs about other companies paying the U.S. government. He talks about an external revenue service. So I mean this sincerely, not facetiously. Does Trump understand how tariffs actually work?
Yeah, he understands how they work.
Does he understand how when a tariff gets paid, how the checks move?
Look, I think there's very few people that understand shipping law. I could probably quiz this room on how things get shipped.
Okay, I see what you're doing here. If he was taking Econ 101 class and it was a very high-level question, would he get it right?
Like, he'd get it right that someone pays the tariff and it gets paid at the entrance of the border.
I don't think they asked. Did they ask, like, at HBS, like, does someone pay taxes? Yes, 100.
Well, that's not true. Half the U.S. population doesn't pay taxes, right. But that's a whole nother discussion. No, look, I think he fundamentally understands. He just doesn't believe, and he can believe this, I don't agree with him, that it doesn't get passed on to the consumer. There's the fundamental difference between my view on tariffs and his view on tariffs, is I believe that a tariff is a consumption tax. It's a VAT. You call it what you want. It's a consumption tax. If you bring something to the border and all of a sudden the importer pays a tax, the importer doesn't eat it, the retailer doesn't eat it, the consumer eats it.
One final politics question, let's move on to AI and tech and IBM, which is the following. If you were advising, maybe you have Kevin Hassett, who's been around Trump before, or anybody else who is, say, new to Trump world in an administration role, what would be your one piece of advice to them?
So Kevin's not new. He was my CEO. He was CEO.
I'm sorry,
he was
he's
CEO
in your job
when I was
now,
there.
yeah.
I worked a lot with Kevin. Look, I think what I would advise them is, like, the risk in Washington is to try and do too many things. There's this big debate on one bill or two bills, and the reason there's a debate on one or two, there's reconciliation. I won't go into that. It's too complicated. But the simple reason you use reconciliation is because you can do it with a simple majority in the Senate. They want to accomplish border safety and security, and they want to accomplish tax reform. I think tax reform by itself is going to be very difficult to get done. because there's a bunch of small constituents in the House that believe very strongly in certain aspects, and any three of them together can block a bill. So you've got some deficit hawks in there. You've got some people that won't vote for a tax bill that doesn't increase state and local tax deductions. You've got some people in there that want to include everything that Donald Trump promised on the campaign trail, including no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime, no tax on anything. So if you lose any three, you've got a problem. So the reason they're trying to throw this into one bill is they're going to try and make it hard for anyone to vote against closing the border. Yeah. But it's going to be hard to put two things into one bill. So my word of advice to them is better to get something, which is the border, and get it done, and then work on the tax plan than to get nothing. We remember back, we ended up in the same situation. Before we took office, the House had decided to repeal Obamacare. So we were thrown into repeal and replace. We had zero plan for repeal and replace. We never thought we were going to do it. We thought we were going right to taxes. We ended up getting sort of sideswiped on repeal and replace.
Let me ask, it's politics, but it's really an AI question, which is there is now an AI and crypto czar in the White House or part of the administration. What would be the one thing you, if you talked to David Sachs or did, what would be the one thing you hope that an AI czar would advise the administration to do?
Continue to allow the U.S. to be the dominant creative force in AI. Don't over-regulate AI.
When you say over-regulate, do you believe that the Biden EO on AI, which has now been repealed, was that over-regulation?
Look, I don't think it was that prescriptive. But at the end of the day, I think like our competitive advantage in the United States is we've got capital and we've got creativity and we've got entrepreneurial spirit. We want to continue to thrive with that. We have done extraordinary things. We want to continue to have all of our smart minds contribute to the AI world. We don't want to let someone else win. So to me, we don't want to go out and start regulating models and how they're and that. What we do need to regulate, and I do think there will be some regulation, is you need to regulate the ultimate activity if it is a regulated activity. So by that, very simply, I mean, if you used a mapping program to get here today, because I did, because I couldn't find this, and the map took me 5 steps out of my way, I don't think that needs to be regulated. If you got a bad song during your workout this morning because Spotify picked a bad song, I don't think that needs to be regulated. If some doctor is putting your symptoms into an AI machine and they're diagnosing your illness, I think we should regulate that, because that's a regulated industry today.
When you think of your enterprise clients, what is really working right now? You know, when we talk about AI, there's a lot of, and we were talking a little bit backstage about, you know, these future use cases and where we might get. Right now, what is really working for them?
So look, at IBM, remember, we're in the enterprise side. So we're B2B. We're not trying to create a chat bot for any of you. You're
not going to compete with Spotify?
Not going to compete with. Okay. No. Spotify will be a client of mine, which is great. What's working are efficiency tools. So, you know, we've talked a lot about an HR chat bot, which is not that sophisticated, but you think about it. We have a large employee population. You know, what do employees need most often? They need a reference letter. They need to know how long they've worked at the company, what their title is, what their annual salary is, what the last 3 years of compensation are. Historically, we called someone, we got them on the phone, we asked them for it, and we hope they remembered to do it, and we hope they sent a letter. You go on the chat bot, you put in, I want 3 years of annual compensation, I want my title, and I want it sent to this address, and guess what? By the time you hit send, it's basically gone. So our employees are really happy to see stuff like that. We do it on, and we have made ourselves client number one for the vast majority of our AI products. So we've got an AI product that does that. We've got an AI product that it's a code assist. If you've got different programs in different languages and you want to get your organization into one programming code, which a lot of the big institutions, they've bought different software over time, we can port it all to one code, and you can do that. We've got programs that go through procurement, that go through supply chain analysis, that monitor your supply chain. They'll tell you, you know, it's a little bit like the smart refrigerator. Hey, your milk's running low, but on a big, massive
scale. Are
you
worried at some point about differentiation? Because basically everyone, well, you don't have to, but anyone who buys a new refrigerator can now buy a smart refrigerator, and there's 20 different companies that make them, and they all basically do the same thing.
Yeah, look, I think at the end of the day, there will be differentiation. There will also be consolidation. You know, so you know, we have been in the AI business, I would venture to say, as long as anybody. I will remind people, probably some of you weren't born yet, that Watson actually won at Jeopardy decades and decades ago. That was AI.
For some who are too young, that was a game show that was on something called a TV, which was in front of a couch. It was
that was on the
fantastic.
wall that actually came on at a specific time,
Yeah.
and you didn't get to watch it when you wanted to watch it.
Crazy times. Crazy times.
Crazy times.
All right, let me end with this, because we started a little bit by talking about regulation, change of regulation. You talked about potentially consolidation. Should we expect that IBM is going to make a major acquisition this year?
Look, IBM has always been making acquisitions. I think we'll always look at opportunities. We're going to close on one that we made last year in the next few weeks with the new administration. And we'll always be open to making IBM a better company for our clients.
Gary, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Good evening. I'm Nicholas Johnson. I'm the publisher at Axios. Thank you all today for lining up outside, packing this place to the rafters. We're really grateful that you're all here. Super grateful to Qualcomm House for giving us this great space. And everything we do at Axios wouldn't be possible without our partners. And a great partner this week at Davos also is Lightspeed Venture Partners. So I'm very happy to welcome to the stage for a view from the top conversation. Partner and global leader at Lightspeed, Bejal Sumaya. Bejal.
Thank
You beat
you.
me
Good
up
to
here
be
before
here.
I was done with the introduction. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a busy week.
Let's start really big picture. I want to talk like investment trends at a macro level. Gary just touched on some of the big economic pictures. From your vantage point at a VC firm, give us a sense of the mood. What are you looking at? How are the trends looking at? What's 2025 shaping up to be?
You know, I think if we take a step back from just 2025, our industry has been transformed. It was a cottage industry. Small firms, small partnerships. Technology was in a corner of the economy. And if we think about what's happened, it's everywhere now. It's everywhere in enterprises.
The biggest story.
It's everywhere in our lives. The top 5 companies in the S&P are technology companies. 10% of GDP is the digital economy. And so what that means is the financing of technology companies is no longer a small business. It's grown about 10 times over the last 15 years, and that has a lot of implications for how we operate and how the industry is changing.
And how is your job? How is your day-to-day? How does the operation of the firm change when it's gone from something that's small to something that's literally massive? I mean, the big stories today are hundreds of billions of dollars in
and
projects
it's
being
not just the scale. It's, there's a few things alongside the scale. So why has it grown? The size of the prize is bigger than we ever thought possible. Amazon went public in '99 at about $430 million market cap. Today, you have private companies that are north of $50 billion. And you have formerly venture-backed companies like Google or Amazon that are now worth trillions of dollars. So I think there's a recognition that the size of the prize is way bigger than any of us thought. But the complexity has also gone up. And we'll talk about, AI is going to be everywhere, right? But we've got to understand the underlying technology. It's changing at a pace that no technology has ever changed. That has implications for us as investors and how quickly we've got to wipe the slate clean and rethink what we thought was true.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because under Swiss law, I have to talk about AI up here during Davos. Let's do it in 2 pieces. Let's first talk about how it's impacting your life as a VC, and then I want to take a step back and talk about broader AI trends. So let's talk about AI like in your office. Right
well,
now.
look, I want to, before we even go to AI, I think this is the mistake actually a lot of folks are making as it relates to their businesses. They think about, how can I use AI in my business? I think the first question for us is, what does AI mean for our business? So to give you a sense, the global market for software is about $900 billion, okay? But a lot of services are going to get automated. The global market for talent is way more than $900 billion. So first of all, there's going to be this massive market expansion because technology is no longer just going to automate workflows, it's going to automate work. So what does it mean if we're going to see a massive shift in addressable market for us? It means that we've got to rethink the way we operate as an organization, right? We've got to change our mindset. Way more expertise in the firm around technology and all of the sectors that AI is going to go into. Way more collaboration, way less individual ego and celebrity.
How do you view AI as an augmentation tool? We've talked this a lot up here on the stage and at the Lightspeed House earlier this week. That balance between replacing workers and helping workers at a very high level in a VC firm. How is that journey for you?
Well, look, right now, and I think this is true of a lot of businesses, it will start with being a co-pilot. We'll start with augmentation. And that is the start of the journey. And over time, we'll have to see what levels the augmentation increases to. But, for example, today, there used to be a time when an investor would come in on a Monday and talk about a portfolio company board meeting the prior week. Today, they don't need to do that because we will pull the board deck from email, run it through a model, summarize it into a template that we need, and we'll get summaries of that on Sunday night.
So then what's that guy doing on Monday?
Good question. We'll figure out how to augment it even more.
This is the fascinating part about Davos. It seems like in the past year, it went from, last year was AI hype, and this year is AI implementation, where we're finally seeing how it happens, and we're encountering those things where it's sort of well, you used to do this with a person, and now the person's not doing it. So what's the person doing, or what do I do next?
We're simplifying it. The person's obviously doing many other things.
Something better to do?
Certainly got something better to do. I would say a more qualitative overlay of what's happening in a company, right? And the discussion gets up-leveled. It may free up time for that person to spend more of their time finding the next Anthropic or Mistral or SpaceX.
Instead of summarizing something that's
which is the single most valuable thing they could do, right? So, again, I think it's easy to think about this as a replacement, but really, we will all be forced to up-level in some way and think about what our highest use is.
Where are we, or where are maybe you in that conversation, in the journey of seeing the real ROI on it? As in, okay, I'm not doing things, or your employees or partners are not doing things that are lower value and are turning to higher value. When do you start to see the impact of that?
I think we'll probably see that later on this year, okay? I think today we're still leveraging this technology in a way that increases, let's call it productivity within the firm. But the real value, again, in our business comes from finding the next outlier. And that will come from the models that we're building to identify what those are without someone actually having to go through a bunch of lists or be out there in the field. They'll still do that. Or who are the most talented people? Where are the mafias of founders emerging from? If you think about the PayPal mafia, going back to Internet 1.0, there's a lot of people that came out of that mafia, including Elon Musk, that have created a shitload of value. Well, what are the next versions of that?
And you can ask an AI, I guess, to begin that journey. Give me some lists and then bring that to a human.
Absolutely.
Determination.
Absolutely.
To take a step back then away on the broader AI trends, as an investor, as someone who serves on boards, who speaks to lots of people in the community, what are you looking for? What's next over the horizon? What are you keeping an eye on? What are the big picture AI trends?
Look, I think what we're keeping an eye on is enterprise adoption. Right. This is still, if we think,
and that's that implementation where we get to see
this is where technology meets the real world, right? If we think about 24, I would say we exited 24 with the technology more advanced than we thought when we entered 24, but with enterprise adoption less further than we thought when we entered 24, and that's because, and I was chatting with Gary earlier, it's change. You've got to change people. You've got to change organizations. People are worried about what this means, behavior, so on and so forth.
From an investment standpoint, then, what are you looking at? I mean, if companies that are going to benefit from this implementation this year, they exist, they probably have products out in market. What's the next thing over the horizon? What's the startup that comes after that?
Yeah, look, we've been pretty heavily invested in the foundation model layer. We're investors in Anthropic, XAI, Mistral, and one other that I can't speak about. But we've been fairly. I'm really sure. No. So we've been pretty active there. I think this will be the year that you start seeing an explosion of applications being built on top of the infrastructure. And so now, and that will start having this technology be usable in various different industries. You've already seen some in healthcare, you see some in defense. We'll start seeing this move into the real world, into manufacturing, robotics. I mean, I think when we are here next year, we'll be imagining a very different world.
I've heard that too. For folks in the room who are maybe not at the cutting edge of investment, or maybe not at AI firms, but are on firms that will be impacted by this next, what's the advice you can give them? What can you tell them to watch out for? What should they beware of?
Yeah, look, I think today, I think most of us will be inclined to think about how we leverage AI like it is another technology. I think that's an error. I think the way and that may be okay just to start implementation. We need to understand the technology and think about if we were starting our business today, knowing that this technology exists, what kind of an organization would you build? Because that organization is going to look very, very different. And if we're just leveraging it, all our gains are going to be incremental.
So this is your advice seems to be even more aggressive. Don't use AI to improve processes that exist, blow up those processes and start from scratch?
Start somewhere. So if it starts with just automates, that's fine. But it can't just be that. There needs to be, if you're running a big company, you should have someone at exec level that is thinking about what would we do if we started this business today, understanding the capabilities of this technology, and ideally having a forward view of where this is going.
And we talked about this earlier with some of the events at Lighthouse, advice on just using it in daily life. Is that a good way? I mean, how often are you talking to LLM to figure out things?
Every day.
What are your favorite use cases of that?
Well, it could be, I asked Claude to design a nutrition plan for me that had 150 grams of protein and a maximum of 2,000 calories a day. And it did a better job than a nutritionist could. And then I said, here are the things I don't eat and a bunch of medical conditions I have, and I have a great plan. So anything from there to, we need to hire a next great enterprise investor. Give me a list of the top 5.
So get in there and start using it.
Get in there and start using
it out. That's awesome. We're going to end on one fun thing here because we love to do that at Axios here in Davos. We end on one Davos thing. We're halfway through the week. How's your Davos been? What's the tip to get through the rest of it?
Save your sleep for the flight home.
See you at the nightcaps tonight. Bejul, thanks for being here. Thanks for Lightspeed for making all this possible. Let's get Ina Fried up here to continue the conversation.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Ina Fried, Chief Technology Correspondent at Axios. I assume Mark needs no introduction. Just a gentle reminder, please don't rush the stage. We have more programming. So, we've heard you have just throngs of fans. So
they're coming for you, not me. Don't worry.
If you don't get my newsletter, I do a daily AI newsletter. Axios.com/newsletters will hook you up. Mark, so good.
How about a hand for Ina Fried? Come on.
One of the things, if we'd had a drink every time we said the word agent at Davos, we'd all be wasted. One of the things I've been asking a lot of people is...
Is that why we set this up?
Yes,
this is
totally.
Agent. What are these shots of... Okay.
One of the things I've been asking everyone is, when you say agent, what do you mean? Because I've heard, we can stop now, really. Because a lot of people mean a lot of different things. Sometimes I call them little a agents. They're really still returning information. All right, we got a lot to get through. And we're not...
Is this the first time you've done a series
no,
of
I'm
shots
gonna
during an interview? Okay.
Watch how I do it now.
All right.
So when
checking.
people use that term, a lot of people... When people use
think
that
this is
term...
water, by the way. They don't realize... by the end of the interview, it's going to be fantastic.
It really is good stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of people mean different things. Sometimes they really just mean returning information.
We want to thank Matthew McConaughey for giving the Pantalones
He'll be here all week, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay. All right.
Sometimes they really just mean doing a bunch of stuff but still returning it to a human. Sometimes they mean doing a bunch of research, taking a bit of action. It could mean all the way to really doing automated action, talking to another company's agent. When you talk about this being the agents and agent force, what type of agents are you talking about?
Cheers. I'll say digital labor. Let's talk about that. I probably, current CEO of Salesforce, the CEOs who are here today, these are the last CEOs who will only really manage a workforce of only human beings. We are really moving into a world now of managing humans and agents together. So in my own company, the example is I have a site called help.salesforce.com. We get 36,000 support inquiries every single week. If you had gone to it a month ago, then I would tell you, 26,000, bam, resolved by the computer. This week, however, I got another 5,000 resolved because I'm using Agent Force. And because I'm using Agent Force, I just have that much more productivity. Now, I have 9,000 support agents. So I'm already thinking about how can I redeploy them as SDRs, as BDRs, as all these different salespeople, because they don't have as much to do because Agent Force is so productive for them. And that is what agents actually are.
And so talk about the types of tasks that are going to be done this year and the ones that are further off. What won't a computer agent be able to do this year that's further out?
Okay, I have three examples. I just gave you one. I'll give you a second example is for everybody here is at the show, we're all using this app. And the app is on our phone, and it's how we find, and we've done this now, Salesforce runs all the information management for the World Economic Forum, so all the sessions, all the attendees, all this, the whole information flow, the workflow, it's all in Salesforce. And it has for more than a decade. But this year is different because if you go to the app, you'll see right on the front, there's an agent. And you can click on the agent, and it will look at your history, everything that you like, all the sessions you've been to before, all the times you've been at the forum, et cetera. And then you can say to it things like, hey, what session do you think I would enjoy doing? Or, hey, I want to learn more about AI, make some recommendations to me. In this case, the AI is an agent working on my behalf, helping me to kind of have a more successful Davos. In the other case, hey, the agent is helping me resolve my Salesforce, support issues. And then the third case is this. Right now, I'm actually writing the business plan for my fiscal year 26, which starts February 1st.
If you need any help, just send the first draft over. I'll give you some feedback.
I will be happy to. And here's the thing. Well, you'll understand it by the time we're done with the interview because as I'm working on this, I'm actually using an agent and AI to help me construct my business plan. I've done this incrementally over the last 3 years. This is the most powerful time as the AI has improved. But I have a colleague that I work with in writing the plan, and then I have an AI that I use. And I have learned how to use the AI to be a more effective leader. So these are, the AI is becoming part of our life. We're working with it. It's helping us to be more productive, augment us, get better KPIs, better connections with our customers.
So what are some things?
This is great.
What are some things that are further off? What are some things that you think it's really not going to be here
Just
by the
don't
end
use
of the year?
those three initials, AGI, because I think that is this thing that all of a sudden we kind of lose the present moment reality that we're in. I think right now we have this opportunity to really become a lot more effective with AI in our companies specifically. So we have a great customer here at the show, Royal Bank of Canada. They have this wealth management business. It's a very successful part of their business. And we've put an agentic layer on top of how they sell and market and service their clients. And that ability for the agent to be able to actually achieve another level of capability, that's huge for Dave McKay, the CEO. So in a session that we were in, yesterday with a couple hundred CEOs, he's able to talk about how he's actually using AI to make his business better.
Now, you've been pretty rough on the idea of co-pilots. You've said
Don't get me going.
I'm going to get you going momentarily. So we did a story on Tuesday. Microsoft and Google are actually having a hard time getting customers to pay $30 extra per user per month. Okay. I assume that doesn't shock you.
Really? Listen. The reality is that Microsoft has really disappointed everybody with this Copilot. All they did is take the OpenAI technology. We all use that. It's like very highly. I just retweeted like the 30 most used apps currently, and like OpenAI was at the top, but all they did was take OpenAI and kind of loosely packaged it together. Microsoft doesn't have a frontier model of their own, as you know.
Well, you guys don't either, right?
Well, we make many different models, okay, and then we have investments in different frontier model companies, but we're not delivering a consumer-grade product. We're delivering something for enterprise that lets you actually, get that delivered response.
Because I did my homework for this meeting. I talked to them. I said, "What would you?"
Those guys.
What would you
Here's
say?
the
And
thing.
they say you're out of position. They say you're the one who's in trouble. That you don't have a frontier model, and that actually the SaaS
They sound
model,
very defensive.
They said the same.
They're
thing
the number
about
one
you.
software company in the world. What are they worried about?
I think y'all need to go to couples counseling.
Listen, good idea. We're the second largest software company. We're the first. When it comes to AI, I just put a light on this, which is they don't have a frontier model. Why do they have to defend themselves?
But you just tweeted that they're building their own models, and everyone should pay attention to OpenAI and alternatives.
No, you saw what happened today with Stargate. Here's Stargate. This is the first time that OpenAI has said, oh, we're not running in a Microsoft data center. So this is actually the beginning of the end of the relationship between Microsoft and OpenAI.
So they're the ones that need couples counseling.
Well, you saw last year, Mustafa Suleyman and Sam Altman were on panels here at Davos, and they were not getting along, and Mustafa was not yet a Microsoft executive. Now Mustafa Suleyman, who has a tremendous history in AI, from DeepMind to his own company Inflection, to now being at Microsoft, is saying, no, I'm going to build my own frontier model. I'm going to build my own technology. So he's a competitor, has been, of Sam Altman for, I don't know, almost a decade. So you can expect that's the shootout that you're looking for. And these are not, these are not, the kind of frontier models and all this that we're all expecting. We're going to see a Microsoft frontier model. And then you're going to have, OpenAI on their own. And that's why they're aligning with the Masa-san, Larry Ellison, Keiretsu.
And when you, we won't even get into your history with Larry, but when you look out a couple years, where do you think today's SaaS model lives? Because today, most software is sold per user per month. It doesn't really work when one human can be managing a bazillion agents. Does it all go consumption-based?
Yeah. Well, I think that there's a lot of different ways to look at it. Right now, you're right, there's per user per month, there's consumption, there's per conversation, we have our sandboxes, we have our commerce products, that's a, GMT pricing. There's lots of different pricing. Now, when we put together a whole cocktail for a customer, that's each agreement is really custom for every, go ahead, thank you. Each agreement is custom for every customer. This year, we're just finishing our fiscal year. In the last set of guidance that we've already given, we said we were going to do about $38 billion in revenue this year, about $12.9 billion of cash flow. Okay, there's a lot of customers who are using a lot of software as a service type applications to manage their customers in these incredible new ways. As we enter in this new world, we're not going to leave all of these apps behind. They're going to evolve and move forward, and we're going to take it along with us. Just as our customers, a lot of our customers still have IBM mainframes, for example.
And when you talk to businesses, because I think a lot of companies, look, they've spent the last 2 years, it's been the talk of Davos every year is AI. I still feel like a lot of businesses are struggling to figure out, how do I really make this pay off? How do I deploy it?
Are those the
widely?
Copilot customers that you're referring to?
No,
I think that, look, a lot of
people.
enterprises have, all right, number one, Salesforce will do 2 trillion AI transactions this week across our whole product line. That's predictive, machine learning, machine intelligence, including generative, and also Agentforce. So there's a lot of customers who are using a lot of AI today.
And what are they? What are the things that are working for them? What's the tip other than just buying from you guys? But what do they need to have? Is there
data,
business processes?
Data. This AI does not work if it's not grounded in data. So we all know when we're just using AI generically and it doesn't know us, or we've started a new session and it's not grounded in data, and we're having a trouble kind of getting the conversation going. But because we have 230 petabytes of data at Salesforce, we're able to ground into the data, the metadata, the workflow, and it makes the AI so much more accurate. Our customers, our benchmarks are about 95% accuracy. For like a customer like Disney, we're really building next generation, customer interactivity systems. Their employees have a very complex set of products that they have to deal with. The AI plus the data plus those employees, we can augment those employees to a whole nother level. And it's because we have so much data that we can do that.
And the other piece that you need in addition to data, I've heard from a lot of people, is you have to understand your workforce and their skills, and some business processes have to change.
Sure.
Is that something like, how's that working within Salesforce? Do you feel like businesses, because my sense is technology is moving faster than any I've ever covered in 25 years of covering Silicon Valley. People haven't started moving any faster.
That concept of augmentation, we were just at the Gucci call center, which is in Florence. If you go in there a year ago, they were just answering support calls. Hey, my bag needs to get fixed. My vest got ripped. Will you stitch it up for me? Now their sales just went up 30% because we were able to take folks who are just support agents and turn them also into sales agents. That's really the hope. on that level. That is, you can augment, or in the example
And I was
of
actually
RBC,
just giving the Gucci example backstage, not Gucci, but I was saying luxury goods.
Right.
But they strike me as a little bit unique because they've maintained that highly skilled customer support. Are the companies that outsourced it or automated it years ago going to have a tougher transformation?
Absolutely. You really want to have command and control over your data. The more data that you have, the better interactions you're going to have, and also the more automation you're going to be able to achieve. Like that help.salesforce.com site, when you go there, there's two ways to run it. One is you don't authenticate in. You're just running it, you're just asking it questions. Now, the second one is you actually sign in, you authenticate. Now we know what products you have. We know all the questions you've already asked. We understand a lot about your configuration. We're able to look at your configuration in answering the question. So we're going to give you a better response because we have more data. If you have more data, the AI can work. If you don't have the data, the AI just is a model kind of trying to figure out what's going on. Let me give you the example of the consumer side. We look at consumer AI, how does it work? It's a set of algorithms, right? Where we call them a model, but what is a model? It's just a set of algorithms. And then, these kind of consumer AI companies, they kind of went out and stole a whole bunch of data, from a lot of different sites. They've tried to license some of it. But at the end of the day, before that happened, they went out and stole all this data. They amalgamated it. They put the algorithms on the top, and then they trained the model, and then that's how the AI works. In this case, it's a little different. You have some of that. You have other models as well, and you have the retrieval augmented generation, the ability to go out and pick out the data in real time. And all these things together are making the accuracy work for the AI. It's more of an ensemble RAG. That's the way to really think about it.
So I've heard two things that most of the folks here are trying to figure out. AI is at the top of the list. The other thing they're trying to tackle and figure out is a rapidly changing, very different geopolitical environment. And
is that happening?
I read in Time Magazine it's happening.
Great.
And I'm curious how you're navigating. I've come to your events in the Dome for years. You have Jane Goodall. You're talking about these sustainability goals, 1 billion trees. We have a president who just pulled out of the Paris Accords. How are you navigating this political moment?
Well, thank you for mentioning the trillion trees. 5 years ago when Trump was here in Davos in 2020, we launched the Trillion Tree Program. We have a couple 100 billion trees now that have been committed, and we're launching right while this is happening. There's a press conference with the president of the Congo who's announcing the world's largest forest reserve. So that is exciting, and that continues to move forward. It's an example that you can have a successful environmental program with the Trump administration. So I'm very grateful
for that.
Sure,
but we pulled out of Paris. I mean, these are not the kinds of things that you've advocated for a long time. And one of the things we saw in the first Trump administration was companies like yourselves willing to stand up and say, our immigrant employees
Make no mistake. We've worked with 5 or 6 presidents, I have personally, and different administrations. And listen, presidents change, administrations change. We don't change. We're the same value system that we've always had. We'll continue to do all the things we've ever done. What are our core values? Trust, customer success, innovation, equality, sustainability. We're going to continue to be focused on those 5 things no matter what.
So, I mean, obviously, enormous appreciation. A few years back, Indiana wanted to put trans people out of public society. You guys said, no, we won't stand for that. At his inauguration, among the many, many executive orders, Donald Trump issued an executive order saying that it's interesting, he actually made everyone female because he said that sex is determined at conception and all babies start out as female, they don't become male till later. But what he really said
These are the little things that we learned during an interview that's very important, so.
But he said that
Thank you.
Trans people don't exist and I'll no longer recognize them. Are you gonna have the communities back that you've had for so many years?
My philosophy is actually very simple, which is, and it kind of comes back out of that Indiana example. We have 75,000 employees now, and my job as the CEO is to kind of get their back, and that somebody's going to come after our employees or discriminate against them in any way, we'll do everything we can to help them, support them. In that case of Indiana, we negotiated a change to the law. We just were advocating for, hey, just understand what's going on. There was actually, was a pretty big miscommunication that could have been avoided. Now that I said that, we work in a lot of countries, we work in a lot of cities, a lot of states, and while I can do a lot of things, I cannot do everything. So I've also had to move already almost 300 employees. Employees who say, hey, I don't feel comfortable in this political environment, I'm not happy here, I don't know what's going on, I don't like this, and then boom, we can push a button, we'll move an employee.
Have any asked to move out of the United States yet?
No, we have not moved anybody. Are you moving out of the United States?
You're not my boss. I haven't had that conversation. I actually have had that conversation. I had it during the first Trump administration, that I knew my community was coming under attack, and I have a family and a kid, and my first priority is to keep them safe, and so I have had that conversation.
Well, I think each person has to make their own decisions in terms of how they actually feel for themselves. But for our employees, we're a big company. And yes, if a U.S. employee wanted to move, we would move them. And we've moved people in other countries across the board. That's our responsibility. I feel that it's a great part of being at Salesforce.
So I want to end on a fun thing.
Thank God, we finally got there.
We can have another
Cheers.
Drink. Cheers. We talked right during the pandemic. I can't remember, for the Axios on HBO show. I can't remember if it was over Zoom or how we did it.
I don't think it was in person.
Yeah, it was definitely not in person. And one of the questions I asked you is, because at the time everyone was working from home, I said, do you regret having signed all those long-term leases and built towers in so many places? And you told me, ask me in a year.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a little more than a year. Do you regret building all those towers in all those places?
Well, we have some gorgeous real estate, and I would say now we can see that like if you go to New York, there's nowhere to sit. But if you come to San Francisco, even though we've kind of have a mandatory, please everyone come back to work, et cetera, we want to see you, it's hard to people to get, some cities, it's harder to get people to come back than others. I don't know exactly.
You've been working remote for a long time.
My whole life. Because I have a lot of psychological problems, I need to be in a highly focused environment, and I'm not great in a corporate environment, but, I think for each, and by the way, to that point in neurodiversity, I will just say 25% of our employees have always been remote. So if an employee wants to be remote, we're going to do everything we can to help them be remote. We're going to encourage also, though, people coming right out of college, I think it's better for them to be in the office, to get that kind of swivel chair onboarding, to meet people, to kind of get socialized and embraced into the environment. So it's really about, what kind of culture are you creating inside the company?
Well, I could talk to you all night. I think we'd love to listen to it, but they do have some other folks they want to listen to.
All right, thanks, Ina. Great job.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Mark.
you.
And I'd like to bring back up Dan Primack.
Hello, everybody. The waters are just getting switched for a moment. Obviously, we had a little bit of a water situation. Sridhar, please come on up. I want to welcome our next guest today, Sridhar Ramaswamy, the CEO of Snowflake. Hi.
Hey, Dan. Excited to be here.
So you've been CEO of Snowflake for about 11 months now, correct? And something I get told about people who take over any organization, whether it be a corporate organization or maybe a nonprofit one, et cetera, is no matter how much you think you know about the organization, and you'd been there for a little while, you show up, you get behind the big desk, and you learn some big things you really didn't know. What is the biggest thing you learned about Snowflake that you had no idea about until you were officially CEO?
Look, I was actually at Snowflake for 10 months before I became CEO. I probably knew more about the company. Frank was nice enough to have me on the exec staff, was part of planning. All of that is fine. But then when the rubber hits the road and you're like, okay, I am really going to look at what earnings next quarter is going to look like. Stuff like that, there's like that kind of cadence that you absolutely need to get used to. I'd say the biggest thing that I didn't quite expect was I knew that I had to accelerate product velocity. That was part of why I was brought in to run the company. But then changing how the sales team and the product teams work together to take products out to market, just that basic motion you need to do to take new products, that was not quite there. That's what we worked on. And 10 months later, it's a much better machine. So
you get to Snowflake because your company gets acquired by Snowflake. Before that, you were at Google.
That's right.
So now you're a public company CEO. David Solomon, CEO of Goldman Sachs, the other day said, being public's not fun. The term he used was fun. You have a lot of startup founders who have companies that could absolutely go public today, but don't because they think it is more of a hassle than it's worth. Is it fun?
Yeah, it's a great job. Is it easy? No. But I also tell people, all the high impact, easy jobs are gone. I don't really know why. And so, you get to do with what's left. Is it constrained? Absolutely. But I always believe in sort of creativity within constraints. And I think the rigor of actually having to show your books every quarter makes you do responsible things, makes you earn business responsibly. Yes, it's a constrained environment, but it's still, Snowflake is a company making $3.5 billion, growing at 30% year on year. Great place to be. Could be worse.
I like how you say it's the thing less. Is that what I should tell my kids someday? Look, if your dreams don't pan out, maybe you can fall back on being a CEO of a giant multi-billion-dollar company. Is that what I should tell her? That's fine. She can have low expectations. You talk about how when you got in, you had to accelerate product development. And there was a perception, I think maybe beyond perception, that Snowflake, which had been around for a while, when it came to AI, was behind the 8 ball. Why do you think it was, and what was kind of the first thing you feel you had to change?
Snowflake is a database company. There's a certain mindset that comes when you're a database company. It's all about big iron, heavy infrastructure. You got to be super careful. Even now, we can't afford to have a single corrupt data incident, a single security incident. There's a whole bunch of things that you just have to be absolutely perfect on. And that's kind of how database engineers think about stuff. AI is just the opposite. As you know, every 3 months, it seems like we have to revise all of our principles about what this thing is going to do, where it's going to be applicable, who has the best models. And so it's a much more iterative kind of environment. And so I've dealt with both kinds of teams. And so it is more of, there's not a perfect product. You got to iterate your way to a perfect product. But teams are remarkably good at adapting. And I think we have done a fabulous job in the last year of being at the cutting edge of what AI and data can be.
I think you said, or Snowflake had said, the company, about, I want to make sure I get this right, that about half of your customers are now using your AI products. It was essentially non-existent the year earlier. Within that, because there's a lot of them, what specifically is getting the most traction?
It's the simple stuff. So for example, pretty much all of our customers write SQL with Snowflake. It's a programming language. It's typically considered easier than other languages like Python or Java or Go. And what we did was make it super easy to do things like sentiment detection, translation, summarization, right from within SQL. So any analyst now can also be an AI analyst. That gets used a lot. The rest is honestly chatbots. But our secret sauce is we help people develop reliable chatbots.
What does reliable mean?
Yeah, so when you use ChatGPT, you're always in like a guessing game of, did this thing make up everything I'm seeing? Or can I actually rely on it? When you want a business use, that's not acceptable. So for example, we take great pains to make sure that we cite sources when it's looking at things like documents. Similarly, when you want answers to financial information, I can't put up an app in front of my CFO and say like, yeah, this is wrong 10% of the time. It's not something that's going to go. So we have developed basically a software engineering framework for how do you make that reliable. These are the classes of applications that are getting used by thousands of customers. Yes, we have the fancy stuff like an agentic platform that can do more, but I think getting the ingredients right has been the key unlock.
Do you find yourself ever getting ahead of your customers in the sense of, on the AI side, offering them things that they're really not internally equipped to really use yet or use efficiently?
We have 10,000 customers, spans the spectrum. So, there's a whole bunch of people that be like, I want to be at the cutting edge. I want to check stuff out. We always work with them to make sure that
or maybe because they haven't gotten their data houses really in order yet.
There are a ton of companies that, that absolutely tell us we need to get these other things done first before we can think about AI. I generally try to not get into like an either-or sort of conversation. There are things that AI can do for you, even if the entirety of your data estate is not perfect. It's our job, and this is a distinguishing factor of Snowflake, to make tech easy to use, and we are very, very proud of being able to do that.
So I was in San Francisco last month with the CEO of Databricks. And this predates you, this is your predecessor, but he and your predecessor had a lot of back and forths, public back and forths. And he said to me that I asked about competing with Snowflake, and he said, that is, quote, behind us. Are you guys not competitors anymore? And does that mean he lapped you?
Well, Snowflake is the best AI data cloud that there is. And last I checked, that's the product they were trying to create. So I'm not quite sure what Ali means. But Ali also said they wanted to compete with, be more like Salesforce. So maybe they're doing SaaS software.
He did say that. I did ask him, though, because they used to have a program called Snow Melt, I believe, and I asked if he had some sort of clever name for a Salesforce competing product, and he said not anymore.
Look, there's not, first, it's a very big market.
Yeah.
It's going to be, by some estimates, the data market, the data platform market is going to be $500 billion in 10 years. So there's plenty of business to go around. But when it comes to what Snowflake is, we prize simplicity and ease of use and how quickly people can get value from what they do. Their origin is more one of serving software developers. There's a lot of complexity. You have to spend a lot of people time and maintenance to do this. In that sense, we actually feel very good about where we are as a company. And I hear this repeatedly from customers. I spend a lot of time on the road, and that's the consistent message that I get. Absolutely, we have accelerated in places like AI, where honestly we were behind a year ago. So I feel very good about where we are, and that's the future.
There, if you consider this were what you were charged with doing and have done as a kind of a company reset of sorts, is there something still big, assuming there's maybe it's a literal checklist of the big things you want to do, and you've talked about some of them, are there a couple major tasks that you haven't yet gotten to or haven't at least completed?
Like, this is a world that's evolving very, very rapidly. It applies within a company. It applies to the products that we create as well. None of us actually knows what agentic AI exactly is going to do over the next 12 months. We think that, for example, Mark talks a lot about how things like service departments, service desks are going to get changed a lot. That's the obvious one. But in everything from, how do you make your software engineers way more productive? What are the best co-pilots that there are? How do you make professional services? We started a big project to use AI for essentially database migrations. Or how should your legal team work? I was honestly taken aback by how large our external legal bills were. That's when we started looking at, hey, what can we do? I hear AI can help in these areas. So I think there's a lot of change to come. The mentality that I try to put in my teams, I've run large teams before, I ran the ads team at Snowflake, is one that of relentless drive and excellence on an ongoing basis, because this is a time of just a lot of change.
As we said earlier, you got to Snowflake via an acquisition of your company. When you think about acquisitions now, what's kind of your North Star? Not in terms of necessarily the type of company you want to buy, but when you think about an acquisition, what does that company have to have in order for you to be interested in actually bringing it in-house?
It's a great question. I put it into two buckets. We do a lot of talent acquisitions. Small 3-4 person companies, not yet product market fit. And in those cases, we basically want to pay a modest premium to what you can think of as a market rate for those folks. That's one kind. We do a lot of those. Those are tuck-in acquisitions. Revenue acquisitions tend to be more tricky. For me, it comes down to math. Snowflake is valued currently at, call it, 13 times forward revenue. Most startups will fund,
a little higher than that.
A little higher, 50 times forward.
Or infinite. Oh, you're saying if there's revenue. But yeah, fair.
50 times forward revenue. I need to justify for ourselves, what is it about this acquisition that is going to make these two numbers meet? If we can do that in 18 months, absolutely we'll lean into it. That's the kind of calculus that we go through.
Your deal when you decided to be acquired by Snowflake was that you were going to stick around for 6 months.
That's right.
So if Snowflake gets a phone call from your corp dev guys about an acquisition, should that entrepreneur be sitting there thinking, oh, I don't love the deal, but I might get to be CEO when this is all over? You're sticking
there's
around.
a lot. There's a lot of chance and luck and happenstance in all of these things.
Okay, so you talked about how you used to be at Google, and I want to make sure I get this right. When you made a comment after you got acquired by Snowflake that the window had largely closed to challenge Google on search, and since then we've seen obviously OpenAI and ChatGPT try to get into search. Do you stay with that? For consumer search? I'm sorry, not for enterprise. Do you believe the window for consumer search has closed and Google not only won it, owns it forever?
I think ChatGPT is proving us wrong. In that I think it's a product with hundreds of millions of users. And they have added search-like capabilities. There's a toggle in how you search where you can say, use the web to answer me. It gets into a bunch of complicated issues that you love.
If you were still at Google, would you be scared?
I would compete hard, absolutely. But Google also has the classic innovator's dilemma, which is ads make a lot of money. We'd be shocked. There were queries that made $1,500 to $2,000 for every 1,000. That's like Google makes $2 every time you just search for something, not when you click on something.
And GPT currently loses money every time you search
GPT
for
currently
something.
loses money every time. But they don't mind losing money, and apparently they can get an infinity of funding, and there you go.
They can. Final question for you, as I learned backstage. You and I, this is both our first time in Davos. What is the one thing you now know about this event and Davos that you didn't know coming in?
Just density of people that you would want to meet. There's like a ton of people that I've met even in the first 2 days. I've done 20 meetings. Each one of those people, I can assure you, would take me half a day to get like half hour with. I'd have to fly somewhere, get off, go to their office, wait for an hour, see them for a half hour, and then get back on the plane. I think that's been remarkable. I'm also told that this is the best weather, so I'm happy to not be slipping everywhere.
That's what I've been told as well. This might be one and done then. Don't come back for the cold. Sridhar, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Dan.
I want to welcome up our next and final guest of the day, David Rubenstein, co-founder and chairman of Carlyle Group. Thank you. Thanks, sir. David, it is good to see you. Thank you very much for coming here.
My pleasure.
It's good. It's baseball off season, so this is a time you've got some free time.
Baseball's never off season, but yes.
You said the other day that you thought that the business community, and I think this was partially from some of your maybe meetings here, was it that they are going to get a better shake, rightly or wrongly, from this administration than they did from the last one. Are they right or are they wrongly?
I didn't use the phrase better shake, but maybe something like that. But maybe somebody misquoted me. I would say that the business community feels that they will probably get a better hearing than they got under the previous administration. Rightly or wrongly, that's their perception.
You interviewed Donald Trump for your most recent book,
Right.
which is a book about presidents. What did you learn about him that surprised you?
Well, I was interviewing right before the trial, he can compartmentalize very well. He was about to go on trial that afternoon, and he gave me an interview, so he compartmentalized it very well, because I would have not been doing an interview at that time. Look, he's a different person than he was before. I interviewed him before he ran for president of the United States. In the green room, he said to me, David, ask me any question you want, but ask me if I'm going to run for president. I said, President what? He said, President of the United States. I said, Donald, you're not going to be president of the United States. He said, well, you never know. So at that time, I don't think he really thought he was going to be president. He was interested in it, but I thought, he felt probably it's a bit of a long shot. He had 17 other people he was running against. This time, I think he felt he was going to win almost from the beginning. Despite all the aggravations he felt and all the legal problems, I think he thought he was going to win. He's a different person in the sense that he's much more experienced. When he went in last time, he had no experience in federal government. Nobody had ever been president of the United States with no experience in federal government. Nobody. He came in with no experience, and therefore he relied on a lot of people that he didn't really know. He didn't think they were completely loyal. Now he's used loyalty as a test. He's got his people. He knows what he wants to do, and I think he's going to move pretty quickly.
I'm curious, from an economic standpoint, how would you judge the Biden presidency?
Well, if you eliminate the politics of it and you just looked at the numbers, he created more jobs, or more jobs were created in his 4 years than virtually any other president in a 4-year period. Now, some of it was the rebound from COVID, of course. Secondly, inflation was not good, for sure. They missed it. They called it transitory in the beginning. But in the end, they got inflation down to a tolerable level, roughly 3%. The unemployment level is very, very low. And, if you say, look, the unemployment level's low, GDP growth was pretty good. On the whole, his numbers were pretty good. Much better when I worked in the White House for Jimmy Carter. Our numbers weren't as good, and we were criticized. We lost as well. I think Biden's numbers are much better than he got credit for, in my view.
Are you surprised, to go back to the beginning, are you surprised that the business community is so excited that Biden is out, given what you said, that the numbers were good?
Well, those numbers are macroeconomic numbers. The getting deals approved through the FTC and the Justice Department weren't so wonderful. Getting your cryptocurrency approved through the SEC wasn't exactly an easy thing to do. So in the business community, I think, felt that President Biden went in and he campaigned as a moderate, but then he had more leftist people running some of those agencies, and I think they were disappointed. So I think on a micro level, they were not happy, and I think they feel they'll get a better hearing, let's say, in this administration, rightly or wrongly.
You obviously co-founded and chair Carlyle Group. Private equity for the last couple of years, there has been a dearth of exits in the industry as a whole. Lots of limited partners and funds basically keep saying, where's my money? And the response from a lot of partners and heads of private equity firms is to basically blame the Biden administration on the antitrust side.
I never blame them. I don't blame the Biden administration.
That's fair. Why have we seen relatively few exits out of private equity? It's true of venture too.
I don't think it was just because the regulators were the problems. I think there were inflation was very, very high, and so that was a problem for people. Interest rates were high. That was a problem as well. So high interest rates and high inflation is not a good prescription for an IPO. And also remember, we have fewer companies that are public than we did, let's say, in 1997. We have half as many. So taking an IPO isn't the end all of business anymore. It used to be, but now you have a company like Stripe. They're happy never to go public.
They are. I mean, why? When Carlyle speaks to its limited partners to say, why has the exit pace gone down? Not just for you, but for your peers. I mean, the public markets. I appreciate what you said about inflation, but the public markets have been fairly good. And if on the acquisition side, private equity still mostly sells to other private equity, and even that slowed down. And there's almost never an antitrust problem or a regulatory problem.
Right. Well, private equity still, for all these years, like Biden years, outperformed most other asset classes for most of those years. Not every asset class outperformed the public markets. Public markets were pretty good the last couple of years. I should have mentioned that as well. The last year or so, the public markets are up 20-some%. That's not bad. So on the whole, Biden's economy wasn't so terrible. The private equity markets have been a little bit challenged for sure, but investors aren't going away. They're not going away. I think one of the excitements that private equity people have now is that there's a big sea change going on in the investor base. It used to be the investors were banks and insurance companies, high net worth people. Then it became state pension funds. Then it became sovereign wealth funds. Then it became family offices. But now the holy grail is going to be the 401k market. There's about $14 trillion there. And the U.S. government's policy is if you went to Harvard or an equivalent school and you majored in economics and you're first in your class, but you went for Teach for America, and you're there and you make no money, but you're not a qualified investor because you don't have a big income. So you can't get some of your 401k to go into a private equity fund. If you're an idiot, your father gave you $100 million and you don't know what you're doing, you can put all your money in private equity, nobody cares.
Because you can afford to lose your money back.
Right. But the U.S. government policy has been to not let people who should get higher rates of return and need them, the Teach for America example, they're not letting them put even 5% of their 401k into a private equity vehicle. And I think that's going to change in this administration.
When you think that's going to change, do you think it's going to become a true free-for-all? Anyone's going to be able to put a certain percentage of their net worth into private equities?
Well, I can't speak for the regulators, but I would say I wouldn't be.
Well, if you were to design it, and I know I appreciate you at Carlyle, you'd say 100%. But
no, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that. I would say I don't think anybody. Well, first of all, as Mark Rowan has pointed out, and I think it's a good point. Right now, people buying public index funds, they got 35% of the S&P 500 is in 7 companies, more or less. So why be so tied up in 7 companies? Why not let 5% or 10% of your IRA or 401k go into a illiquid fund, which has some valuations put to it, just not daily liquidity?
One of the things, we're about to get a major DC tax conversation. It's coming again in terms of corporate taxes, personal tax, et cetera. When this happened back in 2017, carried interest tax, which is tax obviously that's near and dear to the heart of private equity, was part of that conversation, and ultimately the treatment wasn't changed. Could you first?
It was changed. It went from 2 years to 3 years.
2 years, but the basic theory of the basic argument is it should be treated as ordinary income. The big money was not changed.
Yeah, President Trump
but Trump wanted to do it back then.
Trump was not in favor of carried interest taxation, and it was pushback from Capitol Hill that went from 2 years to 3 years. Who knows where that's going to be? I don't get carried interest. So I got tired of responding to that question. So I just structure my affairs so I have no carried interest.
Wait, you have no carried interest in Carlyle funds?
No. All I have is my stock, my dividends, and my personal investments in the funds. The carried interest goes to people working on the deals right now, and I'm not doing that.
So do you have no opinion on what should happen with it?
I have opinions. That doesn't, just because I don't get any doesn't mean I have opinions. I think it's not the end of the earth. It's not the biggest tax issue of all time. There are much more significant tax issues, but it'll get much more attention than I think it deserves. But
could private equity as an industry, the way it's currently structured, the way Carlyle is and other firms,
right,
could it survive and persist if carried interest was treated as ordinary income?
Well, I think nothing is going to stop private equity from existing, I think. But clearly, you're going to attract more people and to some extent than you might have otherwise. But I don't want to say the industry will fall apart. I think the industry is better off with it, but I don't get any of it. I don't really care. It's not my main issue. I do think that people that want to change the carried interest rules are going to have a tough time getting that through the Senate.
A lot of the conversation here in Davos and on this stage has revolved around AI.
Right.
Private equity has always been known as this apprenticeship business. You know, often you bring in people young as analysts and they work their way up, they learn things. I asked a similar question earlier
It's true
today.
of most businesses.
It is true of most businesses. when you think of Carlyle, do you see AI at some point starting to replace some of those lower levels? And will there not be people to promote to managing director, managing partners?
I worry less about the lower level than the senior levels are being replaced. But no, look, AI is going to help people make the core decision you have to make in the private equity world. Do this deal, not do this deal. So we have a relationship with OpenAI, and we work in a system where you use the data that you get through artificial intelligence to help you make the decision. And we've been doing that already. And it's like take our fund of funds business. If you're going to do a fund of funds portfolio, and let's suppose you're going to buy $500 million of secondaries, you have to go through all those portfolios in that thing. It takes months to do that. With AI, you can do it relatively quickly. And so I think AI is going to change the investment business of private equity by enabling people to make quicker decisions for sure, and hopefully better decisions.
Bill Ford of General Atlantic had over down at Lighthouse earlier today, and he talked about how they now have an actual AI on their investment committee. Not a vote, but it gets to basically tell them if it thinks their vote is wrong by going through all of their old investments and things that worked, things that didn't. Do you foresee a point of view, it's a time, I guess, where a computer or an AI really gets a vote on what Carlyle deals it actually does and doesn't do?
Well, will it have the controlling vote? Probably not. But it will have some influence for sure. But, people have their own opinions, and it's hard to, somebody has a view that there's a great deal to do, and he or she knows this business very well. Artificial intelligence might suggest something different, but people rely on their gut. For example, I don't think Warren Buffett is going to rely on AI to make decisions. And, he relies on his gut, and he's got a pretty good gut. So a lot of great investors rely on their own backgrounds. I did a book on great investors, and most of them are probably not focused on the kind of things that AI helps you with, though I'm not sure that the average investor wouldn't be benefited from it.
Do you use AI at all in your personal life?
I am the last adopter. I'm still using my BlackBerry, so I am not. I'm not usually the person at the cutting edge of technology.
It's interesting. You talked about how you still think investors are going to use their gut. And what I hear sometimes from private equity folks is, yes, AI is going to be able to help with the modeling and with a lot of the research. But in the end, I still need to sit down with the management company or the CEO.
Well, you have to do that, sure.
And this is a kind of just a crystal ball question. Do you think the AI will get to the point where its EQ is as good as its IQ?
Okay. If we had this conversation 4 years ago, you wouldn't be asking about AI, or 3 years ago, or even maybe 2 years ago. So the result is it's moved so quickly that it's now a major discussion. So who can predict 5 years from now? The world may change dramatically. So I wouldn't say nothing will happen in the future that is different than what you say. I just don't know. We just don't know enough how AI is going to develop. AI is really embryonic. It's in the first inning of its development, honestly.
I asked Sridhar, CEO of Snowflake, something. I want to ask you something similar. You recently bought the Baltimore Orioles.
I did.
You have had a very long career doing a lot of things, but you have never owned a professional baseball team, a Major League Baseball team. What have you learned about baseball and pro sports that you didn't know before you signed the papers?
When I was in the Little League, it was a little different. They didn't have all the sabermetrics they now use, and it's much more complicated. And so relying on a manager and a general manager who spent their whole life in baseball is probably a better thing than saying, hey, I've been in private equity for 30 years, and now I want to tell you how to do a baseball team.
Do you have urges, though, sometimes to go, no, not that guy. Why is he batting third?
They let me know what they think, and I tell them my views, but my views are not that relevant because I don't know much about baseball. They have these statistics that I never heard of before. I mean, when I was paying attention to baseball, they had things called a complete game. That's when you pitch 9 innings. Now they have a thing. Remember that? Now they have quality starts. Just doing well. It's like a little league term. Quality starts. I never heard of that, but now that's a statistic. They have all these statistics I didn't know about.
Do you give your pitchers a trophy when they do a quality start?
Everybody gets a trophy in Little League, and I guess everybody gets a quality start trophy too, probably.
There is one interesting tech question in baseball. It's arguably an AI question, and they've started this in the minor leagues, basically having robots or computers judge balls and strikes.
Yes.
Do you think that eventually will come to the major leagues, and are you in favor of that, if it works?
The Major League Baseball, MLB, just signed a contract with Major League umpires, so I don't think I should comment on something that we just did a contract on which didn't deal with that directly. There is the ability to do that in the minor leagues, and we'll see how it works, and it's too early to say.
That's fair. Let me ask one other baseball question. It feels, and I'm not an Orioles fan, I'm a Red Sox fan, so we compete.
Why?
Because I like looking up at things, and every other team is above us at the moment. Same reason you're owning the Orioles and not the Nationals. You grew up in Baltimore. I grew up in Boston.
We've already won 4 World Series in the last X number of years. We haven't won. So give us a chance. We want a chance to win a World Series.
Oh, you haven't watched. The Red Sox are giving you a chance. We're not signing players. As a piece of that, every free agent seems to have been signed by the Los Angeles Dodgers in the last couple of weeks, literally all of them from all countries, including Japan. Do you, and this is a big picture question, not to ask specifically about the Dodgers,
Right.
but do you think baseball is the only major sport without a salary cap? I know owners generally are in favor of it. Does baseball have a fundamental problem that so many fans go into a season, not because of what their team did or didn't do in the offseason, but just knowing, because my team is X, my team will not win when this is all over?
I don't think that's the case. I mean, lots of times teams win that, or people don't expect them to win. Nobody expected, like the Dodgers won last year, but before that, the team that won, the Rangers, they weren't expected to win. So you never know. Clearly, there's no salary cap, and the NHL has one, NBA has one, NFL has one. At some point, there may be one in Major League Baseball. I think a salary cap and a nationwide TV contract would be a good thing.
You have basically 3 careers right now. You have Carlyle, you have the Orioles, and you also do my job, which AI hasn't replaced me yet, but you're trying to. You have this Bloomberg interview show.
Yes.
Why do you do that?
Well, I enjoy it, and when I enjoy it, so that's one thing. Secondly, when you get to a certain age, you want to keep your brain sharp. So, as you know, you rely on other people to help you keep your brain sharp. You can do it by learning a musical instrument, crossword puzzles, foreign language. Well, I do it by interviewing people, and there's a Yiddish word called yenta. And yenta means you want to know everything. And when I was a little boy, my mother said, don't be a yenta and ask everybody all these questions. So now I have an outlet. I can ask people questions, and people think it's okay.
Of the people you've interviewed for Bloomberg, on your Bloomberg TV show, what's been your favorite interview and why?
When I did Jeff Bezos, it was in front of a live audience, and doing an interview in front of a live audience is great because when you do it in front of a live audience, you can get feedback right away. If you do it in a studio, you don't get the feedback. So when in a studio, one time I asked Bill Gates, just in his office, Bill, if you had actually gotten a college degree, you think you could have been more successful? And he didn't get the joke, and he started to kind of give me a serious answer. When I asked that question in front of a live audience and they laughed, then he realized it was a joke. So it helps. When I did Jeff Bezos, I had 2,000 people or 3,000 people in it, and he has a really good sense of humor. He played along with my.
He has a unique laugh as well.
It is unique. His sisters hated it, but it is unique. I don't know if I could replicate that, but it is unique.
All right, we started this talking about presidents, so I just want to go back quickly about 2 of them. The first is not one people are going to expect, which is Grover Cleveland, because you're right, Trump is the first president to become president again with a gap in between since Cleveland. And you said recently that from your perspective, Cleveland had a more successful, I think you said this, more successful second term than first term. Do you see any parallels there, and why was his second term
let me explain. When you have a second term, I know I worked in the White House for 4 years, and I was very young, and I was really tired. If we won, I don't know if I had the energy to do another 4 years. You get very tired. Presidents get tired, and they're older than staff people like me. So when you're tired, you make mistakes. The second term of Richard Nixon, he won 49 states, second term, out of office. Ronald Reagan had Iran-Contra, almost out of office. And then Bill Clinton had his personal problems and was impeached. So second terms don't necessarily they're going to be successful. It may be you get tired doing this for 8 years in a row. If you're out of office for 4 years, you can think about the mistakes you made, think about what you want to do right, and get a fresh team of people coming in that you think are loyal to you. It might be that a second term could be better than a non-consecutive second term could be better than a second term that is consecutive.
Final question for you. You've mentioned a couple times that you did work in the Carter administration long before you got into private equity. Obviously, former President Carter died recently. Give me a good Jimmy Carter anecdote from your time in the White House.
Well, when I wanted to play tennis, I had to send him a memo. The White House tennis courts, he didn't want people using them when he might want to use them. So he would basically say, you want to use a court? Send me a memo. So you have to send a memo to the President of the United States asking permission to use the tennis court. So, a couple times I'd send memos in, and sometimes they came back and said no. So
I don't think anyone's going to have to ask Trump if they can use the tennis courts. I think that's going to be all right.
The answer will be no.
David, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Right, bye. Bye.